Oh, Captain, my Captain, seize the day, carpe diem. What does that mean? We've got into this allocation. What does it mean to seize the day? What does carpe diem mean? What does that mean? Look at every second, every minute, every hour in a 24 cycle. Okay? It's the seconds, moments, and it's hours that changes everything information. It's how everything is operated inside you. Once you realize that settings, everything comes in information locations of lights and travels and navigations and screens, adaptations and force and recognition and time and operation. Everything that you say is inside of you. Everything you do is inside of you. Everything that you connect with is inside of you. Everything that you try to figure out is inside of you. It's you figuring you. This is a fight to survive. Setting the connections of fight or flight, directing lines and communication setting, understand yourself, how to communicate your voice. Where's your voice going? It's traveling. It's going somewhere. Where's it going? It's got to go somewhere. It needs to go somewhere, right? So if you set light calculation of carpe diem and you seize the day does not mean pause. Seize the day is to enrich yourself in its seconds, moments, and in its all levels of its glory. Putting yourself in your system, its applications, how you feel, right? Not how you're going to feel tomorrow, because it's not there yet. Tomorrow never comes. It's always here. Tomorrow never comes because it's always here. So if it's always here, there is no tomorrow because it's the now. So if it's the now, there's no past. There's no past, just the now. Putting all timeline sequences and all set locations to your balance is putting you guys back in set location, your system. Now, today in class, general AI, instant line calculation, space-time operation settings is going to put you guys in your activation screens. Your adaptation service, your compute line screen, high position of digital frame location of programs. Compute line screens, high center interference in your alpha channel communication streams. Directing lines into your calculation system. So you know what alpha means? The alphabet. Your alphabet sets lines of communication of codes. It's really to understand how to direct and redirect signals and set location lines of numbers, studying the lines of communication setting and alter states of the mind of consciousness. Getting your track to its communications to really understand how to reiterate everything all over again in high sequence line connections to high vibrational graphic screens and all line adaptation system and its unification setting. Okay? All track to its communication is all levels of you inside. Okay? So welcome everyone. All right. So we got a lot of screen settings and travels. Direct lines, the alphabetic line calculation setting. Gotta wait for more line screens coming in. Travel line communication and graph lines. Let's go through box location, center line tractions, right? 4 tracks in position, 4-point line centers. Wow, it looks like a box with 4 circles. That's a low vibration, right? No, it's 4 box line settings, high travels, a 4 circle communication setting, 4 clock line center location change. Direct lines of communication panels, direct lines calculation time position formation. Change communication screen. See it comes out, see it comes out, see it comes out, see how it's moving, see how it's moving, see how it's moving. It's moving out its equation. It's moving out its equation. It's moving out its equation. See? Pretty interesting when you get in position of travel lines, the point lines of tracks, instant location of time steps, position of patterns, modification lines of circles, and streamlined position of platforms of communication setting in track location of 3 sets. Setting track communication of point lines of set location. Okay? Sets lines of 4. Right? 4 tracks lines of high center interference, 3 line provisions, 4 track line calculation settings, and 3 line connections, 7 calculations, 7 direct signals. So really understand how to shift the anomalies of the mind line communication screens, directing lines of panels, positioning your alpha line connections. So let's say locations, you've got a keyboard, compute systems and screen settings, right? This is your keyboard. It's setting to travel, okay? So So you got your flash drive. Okay, let's get modification lines of lines categories loaders. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Let's start with 12th application. Direct line calculation lines. You have a flash drive. What do you do with the flash drive? What is the space bar? Space in between, right? Positions of two panels and set lines of calculation stream locations. Direct lines calculation high setting. Setting point track settings. So directing signal locations apply to two-line communication screen settings. Travel position line connections, how it travels its line setting. Directing lines communication changes all position programs. Point lines of track, high division lines at 3 set locations. Positions of patterns, 1, 2, 3, and 4 set locations. Okay? Same positions of pi in triangulation. Reposition line connections, crossing line symbols. One graph calculation in one corner, one graph calculation in another corner in Chicago. Direct line calculation line centers, flash drive communications and platforms in 2, 3, and 4 set locations. Okay. Direct modification line screens into 1, 2, and 3 set locations. So it's all about redesigning lines. It's like an abstract drawing. Direct lines, the alpha line, screen lines, and high center of travels, and 3-point tractions, indirect signals, and modification, changing all communication centers and travel. Setting calculation high interference and design programs in set location. Okay. Directing lines and divisions is all levels of box centers and travel calculation of computer frames. Position lines of tracks, point lines, centers of clockings, 4 track lines and 3-line division cycles in high calculation. Changing communication centers and travel. Okay, directing line signals, modification cycles. Okay, waving patterns and lacing lines, 3 tracks, 4 track line provisions. Right, puts lines of cycles, high generation screen lines, high adaptation surface in line position location of its program. Position location of the system, travel calculations. Directing line signals and calculation. Yeah. 8 figures in line connection. Setting programs in high calculation is really understand how to use the alpha. What is the alpha calculations? Tone lines, method lines, screen lines, adaptation surface. Provocation setting the travels. Alpha line in position of B, in position of C, in position of D, and in positions of E. So you have to understand what alpha is through its alphabetical system, guys, through its settings. So it's alpha tone line connections to beta. There's beta, right? Beta is here. All right. Now it's got a sequence communication line settings. So that's position travel calculations, which is line settings to your Earth and traction. And like disappearing calculations. The Earth, right? Sets lines of high generation graph lines. So you stand your alphabetical line screen at high interference. So you got alpha equals lines of 1. You got delta communication lines of 0. You got compute line position of 1. Travel calculation line centers, high position location line center, high interference. Setting in position location settings and travels, which is 1, 1. And travel calculation line center, position location to E line settings into bracket communication of 0 track location. Now, I have no idea what I'm talking about, but it has to do with your alpha setting of systems. To understand how to modify the high calculation high interference is coming into the line settings, getting alpha, and then you come into delta, and then you come into theta, and then you come into omega in set locations, right? Change track lines, high center interference, change direct signals and set locations or settings, all set location to system and travel. Okay. So in that line calculation setting and travel communication setting, equal lines is the correlations of panels. Equal, right? Setting travel calculation of point centers. Changing graph calculation of streamlines, height detects high setting position calculations. Putting alpha lines in a delta, line conditions on all levels, in theta, travel calculation lines omega, and 4 track locations. Directing lines of 4-point tractions of clockings, 1, 2, 3, and 4 in provision. Okay? Understanding energized line screens, XT1000 comes in, modifies high centers of travel calculations of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 track line connections. Point lines of track, graph calculation streams. Computer operations screen lines of high adaptation surface. Changes the triangulation reset position of programs in line setting travels and set location. Directing lines of pi has a high calculation line interference. Set lines of alpha. We're going to work on alpha line setting as systematic line change and direct signals to your tone set location, your systems and rhythms. setting calculation alpha line in position of motor tone. Track location 1 system, right? Alpha communication lines of beta below the signals its application. So we all understand how to use the energetic graph into position of its program in a 4-box graph location. We're going to take out the equations. It disappeared. It doesn't want to be there. Get me out of here. So see how it comes out of track? It doesn't want to be there, right? Because it's traveling too fast. It's got too many alpha lines of 3 lines of omega, bracket communication lines of all program settings in box, equals lines of 3 line connections omega, and set location of body and setting. Puts positions track lines of high center interference into waiting panels and communications and track line connections of point track location. Direct lines, communication lines, and graph lines, streamline high interference have a 0 gravity, 1 traction, 2 traction, 3 gravities, 4 gravities, 5 position locations into percentage over lines equals lines of 1 in track location. Direct lines, communication lines, signals, high center interference, and position of programs. 1 indicates all calculation lines of 2 track line connections, all through provision of alpha. How to use the alpha line screen is understanding the tones, is understand the method, is understand the psychological communication setting of travels. Point line settings and position locations. It's the alpha grounds. Okay, of alpha bravo. Equal line calculation is alpha. And set locations, right? So it has a zeta line interference and zeta line rotation, settings and track line condition, high center position of program, the set location. Direct calculation lines of 2 pi's and generation screen lines adaptation. Point lines of track, 1 line provision, and 2 line settings of all walls. Electric lines of wires, position of programs, center position travels, and pi communications, and set calculation line settings of face recognition. Okay. Point lines of track, energetic graph screens, high center interference. You guys have to start to understand how to use your energetic screens into patterns, into files of communication of 3 line settings, especially for the team, overlapping signals and position programs, direct lines, modification lines, and a 4-track location of measure. Positions of point tracks and high calculation line screens sets lines of 0 line rotation surface, re-angle points line settings and travel position location as programs and set location. Position line tracks, high calculation centers, center line interference, separate position and modulation screen lines, and adaptation line conditions of box centers. Sets communication, setting, position, operation. Illumination graph. See? Set the line communication. See the light? See the light spinning on the same cycle location that it's drawing through all calculation spectrum light settings. So everything is connected inside you that affects everything through your reality through light of travel. Okay? Change the modulation screen location, tone settings, and locations on levels. Psychological reset line setting is all about understanding how to use the energetic graphs, location grids, or anything the portals around calculation setting and Fibonacci line settings and travel. All right. So we're going to just stay with the alpha line screen to understand how to reiterate line connection to your settings. So let's go through Q line. Let's go through W. I'm going through chronological order. E line setting. There's a reason why the computer operates in set position of settings. Then we go into R, and then we go into T. All right. So we got quantum lines, water line, communication lines, and relays, position, teleportation. Boom. That's done. Right. Let's go to the second line communications. Changing lines of high center interference. We got A track. We got a systematic line screen. We have a dimensional line rotation. We have a formation setting. We have a ground lines into calculation of its heart direction of time sequence. Boom, done through equation, right? The D changed the settings of lines. See? The D went doo-doo, and it changed lines to screen. See? Bold, thin, right? Tracks, lines, high center interference, and position line calculation. You guessed it, font. Changing line condition of bold into thin lines of division line screen lines into position location of form into ground lines to its heart direction of time sequence. Positions of track lines. Let's go into Z line. I already communicate the digital line frame line. Change coloration screens. Direct lines, calculation lines, setting in X. Let's go to location of C and position of V and B and connections of N. All right. So we got Z line rotations, X line settings. We have a compute lines into vector. Cross lines in line interference of balance and position of programs. It's application of neutralization. Done. 3-track line connections. Okay. Systematically change the line setting and travel position of its program. Line centers the signals and adaptation of force line communication of program settings in travel calculations. Right? Changes the direct signals in panel communication. And solve set application. Right? All right, so it's important to understand how to navigate your settings coming into console calculations. Bracket calculation lines, Y lines, high center interference, and track location setting, high center. Very complicated if you understand position of programs and line setting, high center interference, and position of its location. So we have to understand how to computate line interference percentage or line screen. Calculation lines have a question mark and track location, exclamation mark, and line connections, right? It's all intelligence. So once it understands formation, it changes the attractions of point centers and track location. Okay? It's amazing when you understand how to use the telepathy signature streams in this application. Travel calculation line setting has a line calculation of 3-point tracks into compressors. Now, they not only switch lines to that location in your atmospheres, into bounce screens and computing lines of ground lines and equal line calculation of ozone layers and position of travel. Very complicated stuff. So we have to understand not just the formulas, equations, but we have to understand our fronts. We have to understand our background. We have to understand how to use the compute settings to all calculation lines to your computer, framing and track line conditions all through its operation. Travel calculation lines in 3-track locations. Direct calculation lines of frame position location near flash drives and application of spacebar. Point lines, alphabetical line, screen high interference into your keyboards, key locks, key frames, key travels, key position of programs. Direct calculation lines of box line centers and travel calculations, right? Computer frames in 3 lines and set location of 3 travels. Direct line set location of 6 over pi. Position locations, center changes position of directions in line signals in position location to the sun that waits on signal in 1 position of travel since that location. Okay? That's my equation. So everything is set up through lines of high settings. We have to understand how to use it through alpha calculations. Schumann resonance, graphing screens, sets, location attractions. Directing lines of high center interference, 0 calculation of 1, 2 lines of track, 1 graph, set location interference, 3 communications over lines of box. So we got 6 lines of high center interference and 1 signal, position lines of 4 tracks and measure, percentage over line screen in all of the program, direct lines modification of 1 line signal, 2-track line connections, 0 gravity calculations, 1 line graph calculation, 0 calculation line system, adaptation surface, and triangulation positions of alpha communication settings and tone line settings in set location. Direct calculation modification line screens. Set balance communication lines to center. Changing position of formats. Changing communication screen lines adaptation. Setting communication lines of high center interference is a retriangulation lines of spot centers. Point systems and line connections. Getting direct line centers. Let's say we go through 14 line valve equals lines calculation of 3, which is thumbs up, right? Setting track lines 14 equals lines of 15. Calculation high interference into track line settings. So we got time lock sequence into 18 equals line high positions into 55 sets lines equal line connections of 0, 1 and traction. Okay, so it went from 55 to 0, 1. So that's alpha line change. Direct lines, you're always an alpha base equals line calculation. So it jumped SCAR line screen right to omega into 55 screen settings into 0, 1 and track location. So it's really interesting how it goes from alpha to omega right away in position of 55 to 0, 1, right? So 55 to 0 is 5. Add 1 line setting, that's 6 over pi. Okay, in set location. Hoo-ah! Okay? Channel calculation lines, this is all levels of alpha, eh? So you have to understand your time frames, your time calculations, your time programs, your quantum interference, your quantum change settings, your direct signals, your compute screen lines. So let's go to 19 line screens into, oh, look at that. 19 equals lines of 54. It jumps SCAR calculation line setting in track locations into 0, of operation and setting into 20 position locations of travel in line calculation setting into operation surface. All through set lines of alpha. Alpha all the way to zeta. Okay? Gamma signatures, green lines, high center interference, radiation graph calculation line centers, zeta. Setting position lines at 20 track line connections. Jump scarring. Getting in that communication, all levels of alpha and track line connections, right? So let's go again. Let's go through 20. Let's go through line centers high position of 48 into 53 equals lines of 53. Okay. 20 line positions. So that's 2 million tracks into 0 operation. Sets lines of slash calculations, right? Motivation screen, direct lines of operation of perceptions in computing line screen. CPU line, screen line interference, and box line connections of mainframe and track line percentage, interpretation of program, and percentage over line calculation streamlines and high calculation stream interference in track location settings in 3-line communication. You have no idea what I'm talking about. All right. Try to understand the provisional lines of left as I understand the provisional lines of right. So we got a 21 track and sets lines of alpha. Alpha is the position of balance. Sets lines of alpha line communication. 21 equals lines of alpha. Alpha equals line calculation of delta. Delta communicates lines of mega. Mega communicates lines of theta, right? Theta communicates lines of zeta. Sets location of zeta. Sets locations into radiation and position location to its line setting into its operation surface and traction. Okay, all three calculations. What do you see information? 6 and 9. Okay. Setting track lines of high center interference sets position location in its pattern, changes all communications, streamlines, and high calculation. All right. You can see the actual 6 in travel. Right. So once you get in that position of travel lines, it has a dimension line scale. It opens all track lines and line the rotation center and position of its operation surface. Re-angle points and set lines, communication setting, and track calculations. So we get a correlation of the 6 and a backward 6 in set location. Bringing 2 track lines of 6 and 6 in position puts lines of operation surface and track lines high center interference in face recognition. Okay? And again, this is just with alpha. You guys have to understand your settings when it comes to alpha, delta, theta, and omega. Beta is always here in setting. Say line calculations alpha, coming into delta, coming into theta, coming into mega. Now, when you come into mega, you come into omega, okay? Omega, come into micro, macro, right? Set lines of alpha, set location of delta, set lines of theta, sets communications back into mega. That's just all levels of travel calculations. Point lines of track is a alphabetic line of reiteration. Setting lines of balance, setting lines of alpha, setting lines of delta into all levels of operation and teleportation, in position of alpha and delta, in line calculation of its mind lines, in position of its memory lines, in equal line communications of operation setting. Intelligence, all information, right? So get into the line settings of screens and really understand how to use the alpha calculations, right? Alpha balance, you can even have a high low frequency lines of a delta, but that frequency line center has to also have a beta, okay? So if you understand the energetic graph screens, set lines of alpha, let's go through delta, let's go through theta. Let's just go through 3 signals, right? Alpha, delta, okay, and you got theta, okay? Now, energetic graph screens is 2 panels and streamlines, direct lines, calculation lines, centers. So you got an alpha tone, let's send a mediation graph in a box center. Put position lines of delta line in a circle line communication. Putting lines of theta in line calculation lines of a TV box screen set location. Wavy panels, communication streamlines of high detection. Okay. It's amazing how it formulates and changes the track lines into its vibrational graph calculation streamline that crosses signals in set location. So we have to understand how it works through the Y-line center to its how calculation streamlines of theta communications. Alpha equals theta, right? Alpha equals theta. Theta is the imagination, equals lines of all calculation of its thoughts. Thought equals lines calculations to its known. Second line converts unknown to its phenomenon. Sets position of phenomenon, equal lines of thoughts, equal lines of image, and set location. Okay? All through alpha and theta, guys. So I really want you guys to get into correlations of balance. Really understand the connections, how you modify your keyboards. When you're looking at your keyboards, you can change the frame every second, every minute, every hour. Okay? So when you understand that, you can understand that high calculation line system has changed its frequency line, so it's Q, but it's not quantum now. It's quality. Changes back into quantum, right? Sets lines, calculation lines of a J line, which is jump scar, position of track lines in travel, in position location to its settings to its operation. Right? 3 triangulation of point centers, right? Travel calculation of point line center interference location system into your diamond core. Center communication line screens and high center interference, changing position of programs, indirect signal locations and modification streamlines adaptation. Changing programs is all about understanding how to change the frames of the alphabetical line calculation screen lines and adaptation location of source as a force to be reckoned with in all calculation of its position of point centers. For example, general AI spacetime with the line conditions to its galaxy of its swirl in the line condition setting. If you look really close, you can see the 6 and 9. Right? 6 and 9 has to be in a program line rotation. That changes the fonts, that changes the communication, that changes the alpha line screens and settings to delta calculations. You need alpha, that's the base. You need delta, that's the heading. Okay, and you need theta, which is your imagination. Okay, so those are the 3 track lines you have to recognize position of frames. Directing calculation of alpha, coming into delta, and coming into theta. Okay. Remember, try to understand how to connect from A to B, how to B to C, how to D to E, how to E to F, how to T, and that line calculation setting in travel. Comes into S, ST, TS, doesn't matter. What matters is the direct and redirect of what you're doing through position of program and set connections to its setting in travel calculation. All right, comes in position of provision, see? It comes into its own energetic dome in set location. All right. Changes lines of communication to alpha and beta in set lines of data in line calculation setting. Compute line screens, position of beta into alpha, delta, equal lines and E lines, high center formation and screen location, adaptation. Changes programs, changes centers, changes signals, changes modification system, and stream calculations. See? Point lines of track. See the travel? 3 line indicated line centers of 2/5. So 3 indication, 2, 1 graph, set lines in position of pi, overcharged in set location. Okay? Very complicated stuff, guys. Your compute system has a format. Okay? It has backline sighting and has a forward line sighting. Equal line condition has a level line rotation in its dimensional scale and programs. Graph and calculation lines in the line setting, you guessed it, into alpha calculation. Directing modification lines has a beta line screen, but it also has a theta of its imagination that programs its system of travel calculations. Okay? So you really have to understand how to use the beta, how to use the alpha, delta, and theta. Okay? Beta communication, coming into the alpha line setting, coming into delta heading, and coming into theta travel. Okay? Theta comes in 2 track lines. High center interference, sun and the moon comes in, position of the program and set location, right? Delta heading sets line screens and high center interference of arrow indicating the programs and set location. Alpha sets ground lines, graph communications to your line centers to Earth. And beta sets line settings and your position locations of your crop circles in set location. Okay, down to equation. Okay, see how it comes in setting, see how it comes in set locations, and all travel calculation. All right. So once you understand how this all works in side connections, everything starts making sense through alpha wave. With Hendall and line center line interference, he has to recognize his set locations to his systems, to his settings. Graph calculation line stream interference, alpha tones, beta lines, high calculations compute system, operation system, omega line channels, direct calculation of theta interference, position lines of energetic waves, Earth line rotations into adaptation system and travel, all through alpha, delta, and theta communications. Okay? So it's going to get more complicated with the team because you're coming into energetic screen lines and highest interference, and the species is coming into images now. Setting graph line calculations, tick-tock. Set lines of high interference, tic-tac-toe, and set location of graphs, right? Where to put the X, where to put the 0, where to put the X, where to put the 0, where to put the X, all right? Where to put the 0 in set location of travel, okay? So does it really matter how many graph screens are in here with this location line system? It's not this, guys. Get out of the equation, all right? It's not this, okay? It's not position line calculation setting and what you think it is in travels. You got to be on. You can add the zeros, the lines, and you can add the X's, you can add the J's, you can add anything in format line center. It's a computer frame that changes the technology and set location. Okay. So get out of that line calculating how you see locations through this perception line calculation setting. All right. Is this a one graph screen? No. It's an energetic waveline screen high center. See? You guys got to get it focused on what you don't see is what you can see. Getting your position lines, your alpha line screen lines is adaptation of balance, understanding the graph calculation streamlines and moderation location and monitoring. Your track lines is your beta communications, sets lines across circle. Now you understand what the beta is, sets up the cross circle platform. But it's a 24 signal, 48 graph, 72 computer, and 144 crystal grid in set location. Alpha sets line settings in alpha bravo. Applications in line calculation of electronic communication, alphabetical line calculation, setting equal line calculation, zero gravity. So we have to understand how to modify calculation line centers, how to communicate with its alphabetical system all over again in computer operation, right? Getting that communication line settings, once you come into graph screen lines and all calculation lines, point lines of tracks, this is what you guys got to get in position locations of in settings, okay? So we got 2 lines of measure, 3 lines of graphs, 6 lines of revision, and 7 calculations. Okay, very complicated stuff, right? Triangulation of point line centers in 3 set locations. 2 tracks in a 4-line panel. Set lines in a 3-panel communication of 1 line center. Okay, setting communication lines a high center interference of 0 and 2 in balanced position of travel in set location. Direct calculation lines at energetic dome screens and high center interference. Putting point line centers in in-track locations and set lines on high center interference into face recognition. Okay? So going through those energetic graph screens, the alpha line screen line, high center interference, really got to concentrate on the position of beta alpha, set lines of delta, which is your heading, which is the arrow, and the theta is your imagination. Okay, it's pretty simple. You understand the 3-point tracks. Beta has a clocking, alpha has a clocking, delta has a clocking. But the delta is its navigation of its console, and the theta is its travel calculation equals lines of its image and set location. Okay? So now you get a better understanding how to break these things down in basic view, how to see yourself, okay, in all formations of alpha, and calculations of beta, sets line calculation setting. You can even add line conditions of its alphabetical system of numbers. See, that's a 1, but that 1 equals A. So it correlates the 2, right? So really A connects to A, right? So in position 1 communicates with balance equals lines of 0, 1 and traction, right? So it's really understand how to put this all together. Pac-Man. That's how the ghost. So, oh my gosh, I'm just having too much fun here, guys. It's so complicated. But really understand the computer line screen. That's what everybody wants to understand. How to operate your own computer. It's incredible when you get into your own technology, guys. It's so powerful. So powerful. All right? Really understand how you can see lines of frame communications of Pac-Man. All through alpha, all through beta, equals lines of 0, 1, and track location line system, and 1 equals lines of A. All right? Make it pass. All right, so understand the computer frame line set lines and travel calculation line system puts position line settings to high calculation in your settings. So the image line changes the line communication to this phenomenon. Once the phenomenon understands the theta, it sets line communication, travels lines of 3 signature streamlines to high calculation. Directing lines of communication line screens sets platforms and communication screen lines adaptation. Point lines of track, in line calculating high interference, astral projections are setting. So zero gravity, let's go 4 lines to tracks equals lines of 1. Sets calculation lines, centered lines, center interference of 0, 0, point lines of 1. Position of track lines in 0, 0, 0, and box line connections into position of percentage over question into exclamation mark back into percentage over calculation equal lines of 1. Okay, very complicated stuff. Program setting, high calculation streamlines, high calculation stream interference, and track location system, and track calculations. Okay. All right. So very complicated class, but it's amazing when you see Pac-Man. Come on, guys, that was funny. All right, so really get into the complete system you're setting. Technology lines is the beta wave. Beta line communication, which is the ground lines, the ground circle location, right? You need a beta wave, right? That position just cycles lines of your Earth, okay? Sets calculation lines at high line interference of 2 track lines equals lines of alpha. Measures in scale to balance into barometer and position into 111, sets lines of summer. Summer equals lines of correlations of box, and triangulation resets in set location of 7 and provision. Okay. I've seen that signature in my energy field. Yep. Well, you know, what you're seeing is understanding, but what you're not seeing is you don't understand. So it's the opposite. It's what you don't understand is what you're going to see. It's not what you're seeing. The equation line screen lines applied to line interference. If you added 3 line communications equals lines of A equals lines of D equals lines of E, you have to understand the representation of each one. So once you understand how to break these things down, then you understand how to reiterate the setting lines of your alphabetical in your position of your mainframes, getting into that communication setting to all track location, right? Direct lines of panels in all travel calculation, right? And again, it's just with alpha. So now you understand what the beta is. Okay, you guys are ready in that signal. So getting in that process to understand the Jupiter line communications of programs. Jupiter has a high calculation streamline, high detection line, screen lines, high center interference, and laser grid position of programs at set location. Then we get an XT line center, high calculations. There's so many XT 1000 streamlines. They go into block centers and travel, point lines of track and graphical screen lines and high calculation. Okay. So the actual XT 1000 line screen is 0 1s. Oh, McCall's gonna love that. 0 1s, guys, 0 1s. All XT 1000s are 0 1s. Okay, pointing lines of high center interference, travel calculation line center, and distributions, and set location of travel and recognition. Ooh-ah. Now you know what the XT1000s are, 0-1s. All right. Plateau screen lines, high adaptation surface, retriangulation, point line centers, and high calculation. Point lines of 0s and 1s, set lines of communication. Now we come into screen lines, high interference. Now the team's coming in March 1st. They're going to come into point lines of 0-1 now. The position point line centers and travel calculation of 3 line rotations in its diamond core and the line centers of 3, 6, and 9, setting correlation setting in 12 set location line system into 24, 24, and 24 measure and set location of travel lines in 3 panels at set location. Okay. Position of track lines in high center interference. The track location of 0-1 is going to be spacing line equals lines into image. The track lines in high center interference in the team line centers, because they're going higher acceleration of Mach lines, they're going to be in point line 0-1. Balanced position of travel lines in 2 bracket calculation line centers in 3 calculations. Directing lines position of pattern lines in 0-1 in calculation to its image and set location of travel. Species, team. Okay? All right. So once you understand how to point the track settings to alpha calculating line system, you got alpha equals line setting of 0-1, alpha equals point of 0-1. That's what we're coming into. Setting track lines, high center interference, all formation locations. So 0-1 is its image. That's where we're coming into. Alpha calculation lines. Equal lines calculation of beta. Beta equals lines of alpha, delta, and theta communication. ADT. Okay? Setting position track lines, the actual 0-1 line setting in percentage over calculation of point lines into your application is coming into new platform. Higher lines of high interference in travel calculation into your transportation units and set location of your transformer settings through pi. Okay, that's what the team's coming into. Right? So now you understand what the XT1000s are, 0s and 1s. So once we understand the 0-1 platform, it equal lines its communication setting and travel calculation of point lines of tracks. Points, lines, centers, high center interference, and position. Equal lines of high interference of triangulation, point lines of Fibonacci, 3 weather communication programs, center calculation line percentage equals lines of 1, signature lines of 0, setting track lines of 0, 0, 0, and position of 1, 1, 1, 1, point lines of 0, 1, 1, 0, sets location of 1, 1, 0, 0, 0 operation, setting calculation of 0, 0, and calculation line stream, and set location of 0, 0, and operation surface set location. Now, directing lines of communication of platforms is changing line directions. Okay, it's knowing exactly what's going on through the center communication of travel. See that? See how it travels? Traveling, right? Point lines of settings, point line directions, all through 0s and 1s. Modification lines of triangulation, reset line condition, high centers in position. So we have to understand what is going on now. Okay, all through correlation of 0s and 1s. Okay. All right, so point lines of tracks, high line condition, high line position locations. Alpha equals 0-1. Alpha equals 0.01 in setting, right? So we got an alpha lines of a beta. Beta equals lines in position. You change the track lines in setting high center interference into 2 operation line centers equal lines of 1. 2 operation equal lines of 1, right? So the track lines of high center of beta comes in line calculation of theta. Theta lines the high position of travels into its image and correlation of T reception lines and lacing communication lines of box centers, high position of travel calculation of point lines of tracks in 3 set locations. Okay. All right. So understand the Compute line screen, understand the formats in your change line, standard location, your fonts. Everybody knows what a font is, right? Travel calculations are lines of R, standard line positions of R. Okay. Abbreviations, center calculation line screens, high adaptation line system, exclamation marks, calculations, pronouns, line calculations, adjectives, verbs, nouns, right? Verberation channels, correlation settings, attractions. Get in your line condition alphabetic line screens back to 0. 0 lines of 1 equals lines of 0, point line centers of 1 set location, right? Tractors communication lines, guys, you have to understand how to, again, reiterate the program setting and adaptation. Changing the process is all levels of block centers, 4 points of tracks in a 3 set location, right? So that's a male line and a female line rotations into the left and right in set location. Okay, track lines, high center interference of 2 platforms. Setting line calculation lines of 2 platforms. Setting calculation of 2 platforms. Security lines of provision. Position line calculation setting and 2 track line calculation license line communications. 0 and 1s in traction. Okay, to Pluto. Sets lines of communication line screens. High center interference, high track setting, high rotation cloud line, changes communication surface, and triangulation of 1, 2, and 3 platform communication. Okay. So provision cycles of 222 is security line division. 222, 3 line conditions, heart, mind, and soul. Okay. So the provision line screens sets lines of tracks, opens lines calculation line interference in track calculation line system. Putting position line centers and all line centers and high line connections to all formation screen line connections of adaptation of sky grid line screen lines of laser communication of set location. Okay. You look really, really close, you can actually see the 6 in set location. Okay. So 2 operations of 6. All right. Planetary screen is a line connecting high frame. It's a mainframe division lines of calculation streamlines. It high calculates volumes, sets lines of volume, VAS, and velocity. Okay, sets lines of calculation of sectors equals lines of vectors and calculations of quads in set location. So you got VAS is the majority. You got volume is line connecting high center position. Volume equals lines of mass. So, and then we got velocity equals lines of quantum equals lines of Mach equals lines of acceleration and settings and calculation streamlines of high calculation. So if you understand your point graph screens and your direct signals, you get a better understanding how to use your alpha systems through your alphabetical setting. Track 2's communication line setting. Let's say you go through line condition. I'm looking at the graph calculation of the computer frame. 0, set lines of high center interference. So that's an open signal to a 0. Setting calculation line center in position location of 0.01, because that's where I am in frame, into calculation line center to my theta communication to its all levels of phenomena. So setting position location operation line calculation setting to its program, changing line conditions of levels, setting line conditions all levels of K line, which is kilo, sets calculation lines of mic in track calculation line system into ground lines of operation. Okay, that's what you can do with your alphabetical system. See the face, see the eye, see the nose, the mouth. Boom, intelligence. All through graphical screens of alphabetical setting, creating its image of face recognition. There's the ear. Boom, without even thinking. Okay, intelligence. So getting that calculation line screens comes in the line center location. There it is. Boom. Hello. So what are you doing? You're creating an image on all levels. On all levels. A set location. Okay. All right. So the adaptation surface retriangulates line screens. Let's go through 20 line communications. It goes lines high center interference into 21. So that line's calculation line centers 60,000 screens, sets lines of 60 billion line centers into 60 trillion line circles, into 60 kikillion line rotation into blocked line centers and 4 track locations in 3 lines of division of 7 calculation. All through time and all through space. All through space and all through time. So when you get in space and time, time becomes space and space becomes time. Going direct and redirect, right? It's like a windshield wiper. Right? That's what an XD1000 does. So understanding the XD1000 now is nothing but a number sequence pattern of zeros and ones in calculation. Yay! Now we understand what an XD1000 is. So once you get in that calculation line center interference, once you go into higher commutation locations, going back to 0, you come into 0 line calculation. Getting track lines of high center interference, an XT equals lines into an 80,000 screen. 80,000 screen in set connections, right? What is an attractions? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 equals 1. This is this. This is this through numbers. Bracket communication 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 provisions, 7 calculations and 8 lines, graph calculation line, stream interference, and line connection settings, and all graphic calculation line interference and solar's application. That's my equation. That's the travel. Getting a modification to its XT, of its image, of its travel, of its set location. All right. So now you understand how everything is created through its numbers. All through face recognition. Bum, 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 bum. Now I can change the 0 lines to A. I can change the program lines to A. I can change the mic line center line communications of A. I can change the kaleidoscope communications of A. I can change the ground line communication of A. I can change the high calculation line centers of A. I can change the level ground communications of A. All through face recognition. Another face at the bottom through kilo and mic. Setting tractors, communication line centers, and all adaptation, service, and face recognition. Woohoo! All right. So I'm having too much fun. But understanding the setting lines of anything through XT1000 or anything to XT2500 or XT150,000 line connection screen line, it's all adaptation of identifications of zeros and ones. So now you understand how this processes you and turns you into its image, okay? All right, so in that position to its location, you get a little bit more understanding how this all works through zeros and ones of traction, okay? Equals lines and settings into all calculations to its image. That's species. Setting lines of 0 and point lines of 1, that's the team, okay? So getting the decimal line screens, the TV screen line has a track lines and a theta line rotation surface into line settings into all calculation programs and line calculation setting in satellite communication. Directing lines of panels is your actual projections. You don't want to forget that in settings. Compute screens, high adaptation surface, and retriangulation point line centers, and travel calculation line system, and all track line connections, in all line rotation surface, in satellite communications, and program line calculation setting, and its formation location of its screen. Look at that. It went out of frame. Okay. So you got to really understand how this all works, line calculation setting, how to really get in position in alpha line settings of zeros and ones and 0.1. Okay, so getting position of alpha, equal lines of high interference, you got to add the equation line connections. Point lines of track is 0, 1 above, okay? It's not an alpha line rotation. It's got to be above the signal, right? So it's above line, arrow indicates lines of delta, okay? Sets lines of beta in ground setting, okay? Alpha communicates line send and circle line communication in your flywheel and direction. That's how it works, right? So once you get into delta, you automatically come into theta, which is your TV reception. There it is. Whoa, look at the TV. Woo-hoo. That's all it is. Reaching that signal is set locations, right? 0, 1 track line, that's your identification code. Now that changes communication. You can travel with lines of zeros and ones into 3 bracket communication, travel calculation line settings. So I don't have to say XT1000 anymore, right? I just add the zeros and ones. 3 indicates lines, high interference. 0, 1 comes in tractions, right? Direct modification lines of circles. Setting communication setting and travel calculation line centers into its delta heading across signal and set location. Direct modification line screens, high interference, and position of travel. Okay? All right. So that's where we're at now, line connection. But you look really close, you can see what's happening, right? In set line connections, right? Looks like a lamp because that's what it is, all through design. It's a lamp. It's a lamp. All through zeros and ones. All through zeros and ones of alpha, beta, and theta. Woo! All right. Now, because you guys are out of the XT1000 now you understand what that is, and allocations, you can line connections, zeros and ones. Congratulations, we're there now. We're coming out of the equation line settings. This is beta communication. So now we're on the process. All right, so getting that set line's highest interference, you can refer yourself now because that's where everybody is going to be in set location, right? How to use your alphabetical setting is understanding how to use your graphical system through imaging. Okay? Yes, graph calculation lines, high position programs, direct modification cycles, and calculation. So we got an A line center. A equals lines of alpha. Okay? A communicates lines of delta. Delta communicates lines of beta. Beta can be way up here if you want to be in a frequency. Okay? If you understand the beta wave, you can change the fluctuation of the line setting. But you don't want to get in the inhibitors of a power of surge because it overloads your circuits and set lines of travel. So don't do that through the equation if you don't understand how to use beta through communication. Okay? Okay. Getting in that position line center's high center interference is beta operational line centers equal lines of communication of 0, 1 in traction. Setting point lines of high center interference and graphic calculation lines of 4-track locations. Direct lines of panels, center line position to its track line connection setting to its program. Levels of set location of settings in direction. Ooh, ah. So all you're doing through letters, numbers, shapes, and symbols is creating its image. That's all you are doing, nothing else, okay? All through pixels, screen lines, into line connections, all settings, through a lamp, through zeros and ones in traction, okay? Or anything the high calculation lines of face recognition, okay? I know, it's hard for you guys to understand these things, but then if you understand how zeros and ones work now, you understand the process that you're coming into. Higher levels of consciousness is understanding how to read its systems, its location and settings, how to understand the transmitting and receiving of the data of its information, how to read the actual lines of clocking inside of you. In a 57 line, it's going to 57 line, right? See, it's not time, right? Time is not a formation in settings because it becomes timeless. You guys are in time. Setting that track lines in position, location, operation, surface, and triangulation position of programs. Direct modification settings and travel. Okay? So we all understand how this indicates our programs and set location our systems. Sets lines of communication to settings. All through set locations. Waving line cycles, track lines. Alpha, delta, theta. Okay? So, getting line calculation, alpha equals lines of 0, 1. Delta equals line set location of 0.1. So, this is communicating. This is a low ground setting, communicating with the team. Setting track lines of theta. So, you got position of 0, 1 equals lines of 0.01 in communications of program line centers of theta communication lines of 3 energetic wave, position of 4 track line conditions of 5 position line centers of travel. All through communication. And if you look really close again, you see the intelligence, right? Intelligence, woohoo! Right? So, it really gets much easier when you really understand more levels of you inside. How you get into that modifications to really understand how to use those numbers, right? Numbers are easy. Letters, shapes, and symbols are harder because it comes into the hieroglyphics of the ancient lines of your builders, founders, and your heir, of your schematics, of your engineer, of your school that set lines of its tool sets of set design and the geometry line connections, your operation system of modification, I said location. All right. So getting in that line settings, once you understand the alpha lines and you understand the delta and you understand the theta, then you can come into a mega setting. Okay, mega setting is a highline communications. It's got so many energetic waveline screens. It's got 4 point lines of clockings and settings and grounds. Set lines of 6 over 7 over 8 over 10 in traction. Now, direct lines of communication line settings, high lines and set lines of high center interference, opens all line communication setting and all line calculation high position to all operation system and 6 calculation streams. Okay, all for modifications through alpha, delta, and theta. Okay. Point lines of tracks, 3 generation screen lines of high center interference, 4 lines of division, crossing line signals, crossing line signals, crossing lines of 3 track location. Direct lines of communication, high center interference, position programs. All calculated modified high calculation line setting. Okay? All through its image. Woo! Okay? So, understanding the alpha is understanding U through track location of 0, 1. Understanding the delta is understanding location of 0, 1. Or equal lines of 0.1. Understand your theta, the same location setting of 0, 1, and location of 0.1 set location, a travel. All through indications, right? So that's what we're working with right now, okay? And that's where we're coming into, okay? Because I know McCall wants to know what the 0s and 1 mean. Now he knows. So I'll track line condition settings to its operation. Okay? Mega pass. All right? So it's all understand how to use the beta, how to use the alpha, delta, and theta. You don't want to be in the mega settings, not in position locations, because you don't understand your infinity set location. Okay? 8 equals lines of 8. 8 equals lines of 8. 2 track lines, 2 track lines, 2 track lines, 2 track lines. Sets position line calculation lines of 3, indicates lines of 3, indicates lines of 3, indicates lines of 3. 4 provision cycles, the high calculation setting time position. Right? You understand what I'm talking about, right? But what you have to understand how to modify all this through your 0s and 1s in traction. Okay? That's it. We're done. If I do any more, you guys are going to... So now you understand what the XT1000s are, right? So now we're on the right track. Getting line centers of the team understands the platitude line screens when it comes into high calculation line system. This is a high formation line screen now. Into 0s and 1s, and set line condition high centers into 0.1 in track locations. Okay? So getting into the positive is line setting in position. Getting into the negative line settings, that's where you got to get in position of. Going back is going forward. Going forward is going back. Directing line, signal line, and position location. So we have point lines of 0, 1, right? Track lines going forward, right? Your position line centers has to go back in position locations into 0.01. So you go into all levels of 0.1 going forward. But you have to go back and understand how to go through 0.01. Okay? I get a position line track lines, I said 2 track line connection high centers, 2 operations on 1 line setting. Position location centers, adaptation surface, and traffic calculations. Okay, point lines of track. All right, so again, 0, 1, sets lines calculation of 1 of 0. Sets lines calculation line interference and position location settings and traffic calculations, point system. So that's what you have to come into is direct and redirect now. Setting track lines and high center interference and application all line calculations in the system. All right. 0.01. Okay. Sample locations. 0.01. Going forward. Coming back. 0.1. Okay. You have to understand the clocking setting, how it goes forward and how it goes back. Sets lines of communication, sets lines of calculation line interference. Congratulations, you got a hologram setting. Hoo-ah! Okay. That's how you create a holographic image. Right over left, left over right. Crossing symbols. Crossing symbols. Making platforms. Making structure. Making division. Making portals. Making calculation streamlines. and high calculation. Okay, a platform, see? There's the platform right there. Boom! Okay, and again, it's through zeros, 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 and zero segregation. Now, it can be anything through zero, or it can be anything through zeros and ones. But you have to understand your 12 DNA track line. What is zero gravity? Is it 0 point lines of 1, or is it 1.01? Or is it 10? You have to understand how to go through 0 and 1, and 1 and 0. And then you have to go from 0.01, and then go from 0.1. That's how you come into balance of yin and yang. Okay? This is about understanding direct and redirect, direct and redirect, direct and redirect. That's all you're doing, nothing else. You can go forward and go back. So understanding going forward is understanding go back, right? That's what we have to come into provision of. Because the zeros and ones is going to put you back in a formation line, ground lines, which puts you into zero gravity in position to equaline calculation of its ozone in its atmosphere line settings and set location. Hoo-ah! Done my equation. Okay? That's it. I'm sure you guys have a lot of questions. Adios. See you in 5.